And next we have Tim in Washington. They, and he says all holy books are claims, that he has a degree in theology and can find no basis of proof of its claims, the Bible in particular. Hi, Tim. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Kelley? Nice to talk with you. Damien, nice to meet you. I haven't heard about you before, so I'm going to look for your podcast.
I am. This is my first time on an ACA show, so I feel very honored. Very honored to be here.
I feel honored to have you. I feel like lucky to have you for your first time. So,
no, good. So, Tim, you've got life figured out. You have a theology degree, and you realize it's all bunk. Life goes on.
Yeah, pretty much. And I got to tell you, I'm a little upset because after I wrote this all out, the meaning of life and the purpose of us, or meaning of us being here and the purpose of life and all of that came up, and it's like, oh my God, I want to talk about that. But anyway, I have found in the last 20 years of being an atheist, I was a fundamentalist Pentecostal for from the time I was 21 till 38, and then became a Methodist. Yeah, I grew up in the Mormon church, and then became a Druid and realized that there isn't anything spiritual out there. We're just human beings. We're just animals on a rock. A little bit away from a star, and that's it. But I find that the stories that are in the Bible, some of them are fun to read, some of them are very, very disturbing. Laughlin and his daughters. Some of them are, I mean, they're fun fan fiction, and most of them are representative, or they're very much like Homer or Virgil or any of the other epics, the Epic of Gilgamesh, for instance. So they're all stories, they're all fables, and I find that any holy book is nothing but a claim, and I love these folks that use the Bible to prove the Bible, and it's like, no, I'm sorry, that's circular. That's like me using Spider-Man comic 31 to prove Spider-Man comic 57 and prove that Spider-Man is real.
Yes.
So, I mean, we can't use that, and so yeah, it's all claims. There's no proof to what the Bible says is true.
Well, actually, no, there are some things in the Bible that are true. Like, for example, Pontius Pilate was the procurator of, Judea at the time of, in the first century Roman rule. There are the Herods. There are numerous Herods. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, did go through the Middle East, conquering this, that, and the other. So I wouldn't dismiss everything in the Bible just you don't believe that there is a deity. There are some things in the Bible that do stack up historically. But my position is that it doesn't stack up historically because it's in the Bible. It's just more coincidental. But my take on the Bible is that it was more written by a people trying to create a cohesive society via religio-cultural mechanisms. Is the way, like, the reason why you would put pen to papyrus, for example, is that you're trying to you're trying to promote a certain idea. And given that during those times, there wasn't much, like, they didn't have governments, they didn't have courts, they didn't have, or they would have had, but maybe in very rudimentary forms. But there wasn't much to keep society together, I suppose. And I think religion and having a basal text certainly provides that foundation that you can then, try keep the masses together, I suppose, is one way of looking at it. So I'm not of the
guess-
position
I
that
guess
it's
that
all
is.
fairy tales and. Sorry, Tim.
I guess that's true, but I mean, even within Spider-Man, even though it is all fiction, I mean, it's set in New York. You know, Spider-Man's from Queens, and you know, Hell's Kitchen is real, and it's a part.
He's bitten by spiders, and we know spiders exist.
Daredevil. So, yeah, and so I mean, there are truths certainly, and there are things that are archaeologically and even sociologically
accurate,
real truths, accurate, I guess. But that doesn't mean that the stories themselves. I think that's what I really mean is the stories themselves. You know, I mean, even the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Hamelin was an actual village. And but the story itself is a fable. It's nothing more than just a story, but it's based in a real place.
So let me ask you, Tim. I mean, I'm sure you've heard many Christians say use the Bible as proof that God exists. What do you think of that approach?
I usually wind up saying, well, if I'm going to use the Bible to prove that God exists, then I am going to use the Harry Potter series to prove that Hogwarts exists. And I'm going to use...
well, I was going to say, Tim, my favorite counter to Christian apologetics is to mention the Book of Mormon. And so we know that Joseph Smith existed. We know Joseph Smith was a real person. And he claims that an angel spoke to him and showed him golden plates. And we actually have the names of, I think, is it 8 or 15? I forget the exact number. We have at least 8 witnesses who have signed legal documents to say that they saw the golden plates. So is all that enough proof that there was... Yeah.
No, go ahead. Is all that enough proof to what?
Yeah, is that enough proof to prove the claims of Mormonism? That there was indeed an angel Moroni, and that, you know, believers will become deities of other planets after they die, and that they'll go to Kolob, or I forget the exact natures of
just in the historical sense that the lost tribes of Israel ended up in North America.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah.
So that's actually a good thing, and that's kind of what I use because of my Mormon background. Of course, I also use Mormonism as part of a debunking to my Christian folks that talk to me about it.
Yep.
And because the golden plates were never proven to exist. However, these people say that they were, and most of them were all scoundrels and liars and storytellers, including Joseph Smith, who was the biggest scoundrel and storyteller in the Palmyra area.
Though I would say that is an ad hominem
from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say that Joseph Smith could be a liar and a scoundrel and a cheat, but he could still be correct that there were golden plates. So don't play the ad hominem that because Joseph Smith was a liar, that Mormonism is bunk. I would say Mormonism is bunk because of a whole lot of other things, aside from the character of Joseph Smith himself, is what I'll say to that.
Right.
I like to.
Yeah.
I like to use a hypothetical. I would say I like to use a hypothetical about. I have a 50-page book that details you walking into a bank and robbing it. It says exactly what you were wearing. It says you were carrying a sword in one hand made by a particular forge. It says you were carrying a Sig Sauer in the other hand. It says what the teller was wearing, how many people were in the bank, how many people witnessed it. It is very, very detailed, and it says you robbed the bank. Now, is that book that I had, that 50-page book, is that proof that you robbed the bank. And that usually kind of hits home because it's more personal, you know?
Right. And thank you for that. Thank you for that check, Damien, because that is thank you. That is a very good thing for me to remember, not to attack Joseph Smith's character as much.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, he was a scoundrel, but but yeah,
I agree. But the other thing I love about Joseph Smith, the thing I love about Joseph Smith is that he actually died defending Mormonism. So you may hear the Christian claim that, you know, the apostles wouldn't die for something they knew to be false. But the example of Joseph Smith, who was actually shot by a mob while awaiting charges for defending Mormonism, I think puts paid to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
The real interesting story behind the story of that is that he was breaking out of jail and he was shooting back. He did not die a martyr. He died an escaping convict. He and his friends were trying to get him out of jail, and the mob.
And I think his brother was. I think his brother was also charged as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Like 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it was about 5 to 8 guys, I think, that actually were in the shootout with him. It was like the OK Corral, but it was in Nauvoo, Illinois, when that happened. So yeah, that's where I was thinking that name of the town. But you could deeper.
But you could make the point that Joseph Smith was arrested and was imprisoned for, you know, defending the faith. Like he wouldn't go through such trials if he knew it was a lie. Would he?
Correct. Yeah. Well, according to those who believe that Paul was imprisoned for being wrong or for being a Christian, or that Peter was crucified upside down for being a Christian. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, it is a good point. And it isn't even just Mormons. I mean, people have been martyred for all kinds of different religions. And it doesn't prove that any of those religions, and I'm sure a Christian would agree that just because somebody was martyred as a Muslim doesn't mean that Islam is true. So,
right. Yeah, that's true. So yeah, that's I loved that question. It really got me, and it got my my theology juices going, and it's like, it's just a story.
Nice. So Tim, tell us more about your theology degree. Like, what institution, what branch of Christianity did your theology major in? Tell us more.
Okay, well, very interesting. While I am proud of my theology degree, it's an associate degree. I worked for 3 years on it. It was through a seminary that was started by the man who led me to the Lord when I was 21, and he had a PhD, and I worked 3 years for it. It was basically fundamentalist Pentecostal, and a lot of my degree was based on fighting the craziness of some of the movements, such as the shepherding movement in the 70s and 80s, the prosperity movement of the 80s and 90s, and even the laughing movement of the 90s and early 2000s.
You mean the Toronto movement?
The Toronto
Blessing. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And a lot of the papers and the research that I did and all of that were based on all of those things, and the craziness that we get. And we kind of, the church, I say we, back then it was we, how the church kind of goes into these fads, and they're not fundamental in any way, shape, or form. They're crazy, actually, and they're just fads. To be quite honest, I mean, there's nothing more or less to say.
Well, I would say that religion influences culture, and culture influences religion. It's a two-way street.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see this see this in the music. Like, for example, if I was at church 50 years ago, we would be singing hymns, whereas now it's mostly there's a lot of Hillsong and like Parachute Band and Jesus culture and stuff like that that's being sung in churches.
Right. And like in the 80s and 90s, there was a huge
The Vineyard
mimicry going on. Like Striper was a hard rock band that was a long hair rock.
Yep.
They had
hair metal band
called that was
to hell with the devil.
Yeah. And we had First Call that was very close to ABBA. We had we had a lot of the mimicry bands. Sheena Easton was oh my gosh, I can't remember who.
To be fair, though, even that happens outside of religion too, right? I mean, look how many bands copied the Beatles, right? And that weren't religious. Right. That's what I'm saying. To be fair, that's what pop culture does.
Yeah, but culture is like this big whirlpool of ideas.
People in. Yeah, and it was to bring folks in, the young folks, into the church in the 80s and 90s, because they were supposed to stop listening to that secular devil music that is nothing about sex and drugs, nothing except sex and drugs, and bring them in. So it was
a Christianized.
So they
Christianized it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And very same sounds, even very same chord progressions, maybe even some of the same versions, only Christianity.
Play the chord sideways and change the lyrics, right?
Yep. And pray before the show.
So that was a lot of what my degree was about. It was about really going into the text of the Bible, and that was probably my downfall as a Christian, because as I studied the Bible, the more I studied, the more I realized this is really ridiculous. Why do I believe this? What this is teaching isn't even what I'm living, and what this is teaching isn't really all that good. I could be a non-Christian and live life so much better than what I'm living now, because I would be accepting people for who they are rather than shunning people because they are. Because
of a theological presupposition.
So yeah.
Tim, I think my story is a lot like yours, except I don't have a theology degree.
Yeah. I don't either.
But a theology degree to really read the Bible and understand it.
No. But having said that, I am fascinated with like the text behind the Bible and like various interpretations behind that, and I think this is an area of study. So one of my best friends is a Jewish convert, and I get a lot of information out of him. It's fun.
This was a great call, Tim. I appreciate you calling in. I am running out of show, and I still got a couple calls to get to, so I want to thank you for calling.
Thank you, Tim.
And I want you to feel free to call back again.
Thank you.
So, yeah.